My world shattered when Lisa, my wife of 8 years, came back from a weekend wedding and tested positive for an STD. What was supposed to be a joyful reunion with old friends became the moment our marriage unraveled. The discovery of her betrayal, hidden behind late-night texts, secret calls, and suspicious receipts, left me no choice but to confront the painful truth and take action to reclaim my life. What happened next? Let me take you through the twists and turns of a story that changed everything. But before we dive into the story, let me know where you're watching this from in the comments below. And if you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a new one. The summer air in the city was warm but not stifling, the kind of mid-June days that hinted at the coming heat without yet overwhelming the senses. Life in the city buzzed with its usual rhythm. Cars honking in the distance, neighbors chatting on the stoop, and the occasional breeze carrying the scent of fresh pavement after a light rain. In the small apartment the protagonist shared with his wife Lisa, things were peaceful. Their home, though modest, was a reflection of their lives, stable, practical, and filled with the quiet hum of their 8-year marriage. The invitation arrived on an ordinary June morning, a crisp, elegant envelope that carried with it the promise of celebration. Sarah's wedding, set in Charleston, South Carolina, was to be a grand affair, a weekend of laughter, dancing, and reconnections. Lisa's excitement was palpable as she read the details aloud, her eyes sparkling at the thought of reuniting with her college friends. The protagonist, tethered to the city by work commitments, encouraged her to go, even offering to cover her travel expenses. It wasn't unusual for Lisa to attend events like this on her own. She relished the independence and the chance to immerse herself in old friendships. To the protagonist, this was just another trip, a brief weekend away that would pass uneventfully. But that invitation, with its ornate lettering and festive promise, would unknowingly mark the beginning of a series of events that would unravel their marriage, one thread at a time. At that moment, as Lisa chatted excitedly about dresses and itineraries, there was no way to foresee the storm that lay ahead. The wedding invitation, with its gilded edges and swirling calligraphy, had an air of sophistication that perfectly mirrored Sarah's personality. Lisa held it up proudly, as if showcasing a prize, her excitement contagious. "This is going to be amazing," she said, her voice bubbling with enthusiasm. "I can't wait to see everyone again." Over the next few days, the apartment buzzed with activity as Lisa threw herself into preparations. She spent hours on her laptop scrolling through online boutiques looking for the perfect dress. When she finally found it, a flowing emerald green gown that complemented her auburn hair, she twirled around the living room to show it off. "What do you think?" she asked, her eyes sparkling. "You look stunning," the protagonist replied, meaning every word. The planning didn't stop at the dress. Lisa spent late nights on video calls with her friends, swapping hairstyle ideas and debating makeup looks. Text messages flew back and forth, filled with photos of shoes, accessories, and nail polish swatches. The protagonist watched from the sidelines, amused by her meticulous attention to detail. He admired her energy and supported her enthusiasm, even offering to help with last-minute errands. As Thursday approached, the day Lisa would leave for Charleston, the protagonist made an extra effort to solidify their bond. Over dinner the night before, they talked and laughed like they used to in the early years of their marriage. "You're going to have a great time," he said, reaching across the table to take her hand. The morning of her departure was routine yet tender. The protagonist helped her load her suitcase into the car and kissed her goodbye. "Be safe and have fun," he said, watching as she waved and drove off. There was no hesitation, no doubt in his mind. After all, trust had always been the cornerstone of their marriage. At that moment, he felt nothing but pride and love for the woman he had chosen to share his life with. Lisa's updates from Charleston started almost as soon as she arrived. On Friday, she texted photos of the charming cobblestone streets and the historic bed and breakfast where she was staying with her friends. "This city is gorgeous," she wrote, accompanied by a selfie in front of a pastel-colored row of townhouses. The protagonist smiled at the image, happy to see her enjoying herself. Saturday brought more updates. Just before the ceremony, Lisa sent a picture of herself in her emerald green gown, her hair styled in soft waves. "What do you think?" she captioned it. The protagonist replied instantly, "You look amazing. Have fun." Later, she sent a photo of Sarah, radiant in her wedding dress, standing under a floral arch with her groom. "Such a beautiful ceremony," Lisa wrote. And the protagonist felt a pang of longing, wishing he could be there to experience it with her. That night, as the reception unfolded, Lisa called him over FaceTime. The screen lit up with her smiling face, slightly flushed from dancing and a glass of champagne. "Hey, babe," she said, her voice competing with the loud music in the background. Behind her, people were laughing and swaying to the beat. "I wish you were here," she added, giggling as one of her friends photobombed the call. The protagonist laughed too, enjoying her happiness. By Sunday evening, Lisa returned home, suitcase in hand, and exhaustion written across her face. She greeted the protagonist with a quick hug and a distracted smile. "The weekend was amazing, but I'm so tired," she said, collapsing onto the couch. While everything seemed normal on the surface, there was a subtle difference in her demeanor. She avoided prolonged eye contact and seemed more reserved than usual. The protagonist chalked it up to fatigue from the whirlwind weekend and decided not to press her. At the time, he had no reason to suspect that anything was amiss. The days following Lisa's return from Charleston began uneventfully, but subtle changes in her behavior soon caught the protagonist's attention. It started with her phone. Lisa, who had always been casual about leaving it lying around, now seemed almost attached to it. She was constantly texting or scrolling, her face illuminated by the screen during moments when they'd typically spend time talking or watching TV together. "Just catching up on work," she said when he asked about it, brushing off his curiosity with a quick smile. While it wasn't unusual for Lisa to be busy with her job, her newfound preoccupation felt different, more secretive. She would take calls in another room, her voice hushed, and would immediately lock her phone whenever he walked by. Around the same time, Lisa began showing signs of exhaustion. She came home from work looking drained, her usual energy replaced by a sluggishness that concerned the protagonist. "I think I caught a bug," she said one evening, collapsing onto the couch and closing her eyes. Over the next few days, her symptoms worsened. She had a mild fever, complained of aches, and even took time off from work, something she rarely did. The protagonist tried to be supportive, bringing her tea and insisting she rest, but his concern grew. "You've been like this for almost a week now," he said gently one evening. "Maybe you should see a doctor." Lisa hesitated, her expression unreadable. "It's probably just a cold," she replied, avoiding his gaze. "I don't need a doctor for that." Her reluctance puzzled him. Lisa was usually proactive about her health, and her dismissive attitude only deepened his unease. Over the next few days, her behavior became more erratic. She went to bed earlier than usual, claiming she was too tired to talk, and her irritability surfaced in small but noticeable ways. "Lisa, I'm just worried about you," he said one night after she snapped at him for asking if she wanted soup. She sighed, her shoulders slumping. "I know, I'm sorry. I'll make an appointment tomorrow, okay?" True to her word, Lisa finally booked a doctor's visit. While the protagonist felt a small sense of relief, a seed of doubt had already been planted. Something about her behavior didn't feel right, and as much as he tried to convince himself otherwise, the nagging feeling that she was hiding something lingered in the back of his mind. When Lisa returned from her doctor's appointment, her face was pale and her hands trembled slightly as she clutched the small prescription bag. The protagonist immediately noticed her unease. "What did the doctor say?" he asked, his tone a mixture of concern and curiosity. "Nothing serious," she replied too quickly, her voice strained. "Just a minor infection. They gave me antibiotics and I'll be fine in a few days." She smiled weakly, avoiding his eyes, and disappeared into the kitchen to pour herself a glass of water. Her explanation seemed off. Lisa wasn't one to downplay her health, and the way she avoided elaborating set off alarms in the protagonist's mind. That evening, she was unusually quiet, retreating to their bedroom early and leaving him to sit alone with his thoughts. The next few days only added to his suspicions. Lisa continued to exhibit odd behavior, keeping her phone close at all times and stepping out to take calls. When he asked her who she was talking to, she dismissed him with vague answers, just work stuff. Her irritability grew, snapping at him over minor questions or comments. One night, as they sat together in tense silence, the protagonist decided to push further. "Lisa, I know something's bothering you," he said, his voice calm but firm. "If it's not just a minor infection, I need to know." Lisa froze, her grip tightening on her phone. "I told you, it's nothing," she snapped, her tone defensive. "Why are you being so overbearing?" Her outburst felt like confirmation that she was hiding something. The seed of doubt that had been planted earlier now began to grow into a gnawing suspicion. Something didn't add up, and as much as he wanted to believe her, the protagonist couldn't shake the feeling that the truth was far more complicated and far more damaging than Lisa was letting on. The nagging doubt that had been eating at the protagonist finally reached a breaking point one restless evening. Lisa had fallen asleep early, her phone left unattended on the nightstand. It was a rare moment of opportunity. Against his better judgment, the protagonist picked it up, his hands trembling as he navigated to her messages. Most conversations seemed mundane, but when he saw her recently deleted messages, his heart sank. With a bit of effort, he managed to recover them. The recovered texts were unmistakable. The messages were to someone named Jeff Harper, a name he didn't recognize. They were flirtatious, intimate, and hinted at something deeper. One message in particular stood out like a slap to the face. "I can't stop thinking about that night in Charleston." The protagonist stared at the screen, his blood boiling, his mind racing. His worst fears were confirmed. He set the phone down and took a deep breath, knowing he couldn't let this sit. The next morning, as Lisa sipped her coffee, the protagonist placed her phone on the table between them. "Care to explain this?" he asked, his voice low but steady. Lisa froze, her eyes darting to the phone. "What are you talking about?" she asked, feigning ignorance. "You've been texting Jeff Harper," he said, his voice rising. "Don't deny it. I recovered the messages. I know everything." Lisa's face turned pale, her mouth opening and closing as she searched for words. "It's not what you think," she stammered. "We were just catching up. He's an old friend." "An old friend?" he repeated, his voice dripping with disbelief. "You don't send texts like these to an old friend, Lisa. I can't stop thinking about that night." "Do you think I'm stupid?" Lisa's defenses crumbled under his glare. "I swear, nothing happened," she cried. "It was just a stupid mistake. I was drunk, and he came on to me. I didn't mean for it to go that far." The protagonist's jaw tightened, his fists clenching at his sides. "Go that far? So something did happen," he said, his voice breaking. "You lied to me, Lisa. You betrayed me." Before she could respond, he stormed out of the room, needing space to process the tidal wave of emotions crashing over him. Later that day, he reached out to Megan, one of Lisa's closest friends who had also attended the wedding. When he brought up Jeff's name, Megan hesitated before answering. "Well, they did spend a lot of time together," she admitted cautiously. "They were dancing a lot at the reception, and honestly, it was kind of noticeable. I didn't think much of it at the time." Her words confirmed everything. Lisa had betrayed his trust, and now there was no going back. The foundation of their marriage had been irrevocably shattered. Determined to uncover the full extent of Lisa's betrayal, the protagonist spent the following days piecing together evidence. What began as a desperate search for clarity quickly turned into a methodical investigation. Every detail he unearthed seemed to tighten the knot of betrayal in his chest, solidifying the truth he could no longer ignore. The first breakthrough came when he logged into their shared phone account online. It was easy enough to access the call and text logs for Lisa's number, and what he found left him stunned. Over the weekend of Sarah's wedding, there were dozens of late-night calls and texts to a number he didn't recognize. The messages began casually enough, but as the night of the wedding reception progressed, the frequency of communication spiked, with several calls occurring after midnight. The protagonist jotted down the number and used a reverse phone lookup tool to trace it. The result was exactly what he feared: Jeff Harper. The timing of these messages coincided perfectly with Lisa's FaceTime call to him during the after-party, making it clear she had been splitting her attention between him and Jeff that very night. Next, he turned to social media, a treasure trove of unfiltered snapshots from the wedding. Lisa had been careful about what she posted, sticking to group photos and scenic shots of Charleston, but her friends were less cautious. As he scrolled through tagged posts, he came across a picture that made his stomach churn. In the photo, Lisa stood next to a tall, well-dressed man at the wedding reception. She was smiling, her body angled toward him in a way that spoke volumes. The caption read, "Sarah's big day. Such a fun weekend with old friends and new ones. Wedding vibes." The man was tagged as Jeff Harper. The protagonist clicked on Jeff's profile, which was public. His feed was filled with flashy posts, pictures of expensive cars, parties, and himself in various luxury settings. One post from the wedding weekend showed him raising a glass with a smug grin, captioned, "A night to remember in Charleston." The implication was clear, even if the details were not. Determined to find concrete proof, the protagonist delved into their shared financial accounts. Lisa had always been careful with money, so the irregularities he discovered were glaring. There were charges from that weekend that didn't align with what she had told him about her plans. One charge in particular stood out: a luxury hotel in Charleston, separate from the venue where she and her friends were staying. The date matched the night of the wedding reception. The protagonist stared at the transaction, his mind racing with the implications. There were other red flags too: late-night rideshare charges that didn't match the itinerary she had mentioned, an expensive dinner at a high-end restaurant, and a spa visit that felt out of place for someone on a supposedly casual group trip. Every piece of evidence pointed to a narrative Lisa had desperately tried to conceal. With the phone logs, social media posts, and financial records laid out in front of him, the protagonist felt a wave of anger and heartbreak. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment or a harmless mistake. Lisa had planned her actions, covered her tracks, and spent their shared resources to facilitate her betrayal. The depth of her deception cut deeper than he had imagined. That evening, he sat at the kitchen table, the evidence spread out before him. When Lisa walked in, she froze at the sight. Her face went pale as she realized what he had uncovered. "Explain this," he said coldly, gesturing to the phone records and receipts. "Explain the hotel, the texts, and Jeff Harper." Lisa stammered, her voice cracking under the weight of her lies. I didn't mean for it to happen," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I was drunk, and things got out of hand. It was a mistake." "A mistake?" he snapped, his voice rising. "A mistake is forgetting an anniversary, not spending the night with another man and lying about it." Lisa broke down, but her tears did nothing to soften the pain or anger coursing through him. The evidence was undeniable, and so was the reality. The woman he had trusted with his heart had shattered it completely. The betrayal was deeper than he had imagined, and there was no coming back from it. Determined to ensure justice after Lisa's betrayal, the protagonist scheduled a meeting with a well-regarded divorce attorney, Mr. Nolan, known for handling high-conflict cases. During their first consultation, the protagonist laid out the evidence he had painstakingly gathered: the recovered text messages, phone records, incriminating social media posts, and financing transactions from the wedding weekend. Mr. Nolan listened carefully, nodding as he reviewed the documentation. "This is a strong case," he said, his tone professional yet sympathetic. "Infidelity combined with the misuse of marital funds puts you in a favorable position. The court takes these matters seriously, especially when there's clear evidence like this." The attorney advised the protagonist to prepare for an aggressive legal approach. "We'll move swiftly," Mr. Nolan added. "Serving the papers at her workplace will send a clear message. Her actions have consequences." The The protagonist hesitated at the suggestion, knowing it would be a public humiliation for Lisa, but ultimately agreed. He was determined to protect himself and ensure that her betrayal didn't go unnoticed. A week later, Lisa was served the divorce papers at her office. The news quickly spread among her coworkers, leaving her visibly shaken when she returned home that evening. She stormed into the apartment, her face flushed with anger. "How could you humiliate me like that?" she yelled, throwing the papers onto the kitchen counter. "Serving me at work? You've crossed the line." The protagonist, calm but resolute, met her glare. "I didn't humiliate you, Lisa. You did that to yourself the moment you decided to betray me." Her anger quickly turned to desperation as tears welled up in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she sobbed, reaching out to him. "I made a mistake. Please, we can fix this. I'll do whatever it takes." But her pleas fell on deaf ears. The protagonist, still raw from the pain of her betrayal, couldn't bring himself to offer her the forgiveness she begged for. "This isn't something you can fix, Lisa," he said, his voice steady. "You destroyed our marriage. There's no going back." Over the next few days, Lisa's emotions swung wildly. One moment she would be sobbing uncontrollably, begging for a second chance. "Please don't throw away everything we've built," she pleaded, clutching his arm. "I'll go to therapy, I'll change, just don't give up on us." The next moment, her desperation would turn to fury. "You're not perfect either," she snapped during one heated argument. "We both made mistakes. Why are you acting like you're completely blameless?" Her shifting tactics, alternating between remorse and deflection, only solidified the protagonist's decision. He saw through her attempts to manipulate his emotions, recognizing them as yet another way she avoided taking full responsibility for her actions. By the time the dust began to settle, the protagonist's resolve had only strengthened. Lisa's betrayal had not only ended their marriage, but revealed a side of her he could no longer respect or trust. The legal process was just beginning, but he was ready to face it head-on, determined to rebuild his life without her. With the divorce in motion, the protagonist decided it was time to let the truth be known. Quietly and methodically, he reached out to friends and family, ensuring they heard the story directly from him. He avoided sensationalizing the events, sticking to the facts. Lisa had been unfaithful, and her betrayal had irreparably damaged their marriage. "I wanted you to know why Lisa and I are divorcing," he told a close friend over coffee. "I've found undeniable evidence that she cheated on me during Sarah's wedding. I'm devastated, but I can't ignore the truth." The friend, initially shocked, expressed unwavering support. "I'm so sorry you're going through this. You didn't deserve any of it," they said. The ripple effect was swift. Mutual friends, many of whom had known Lisa for years, began to distance themselves from her. While some tried to remain neutral, their hesitance to support her spoke volumes. Even Lisa's closest allies couldn't fully defend her actions. The most significant reaction, however, came from Sarah, the bride. The protagonist hesitated to involve her, but ultimately decided she deserved to know the extent of what had happened during her wedding weekend. When they spoke, Sarah was visibly upset. "She spent the whole weekend talking about how much she missed you," Sarah said, her voice tinged with disbelief. "And to think she was sneaking around with Jeff. I'm so disappointed in her. That's not the Lisa I thought I knew." Sarah's reaction was a turning point. The disappointment of someone Lisa had considered a lifelong friend underscored the gravity of her actions. The betrayal wasn't just a private matter anymore. It had fractured her social circle and tarnished her reputation. As the protagonist watched these relationships unravel, he felt a bittersweet mix of validation and sadness. Lisa's actions had cost her more than just her marriage. They had cost her the trust and respect of those closest to her. The decision to confront Jeff Harper wasn't made lightly. The protagonist had spent days debating whether it was worth the effort, but ultimately he felt it was necessary. Jeff had played a central role in the betrayal that destroyed his marriage, and the protagonist wanted him to understand the consequences of his actions. Armed with a folder of evidence, text messages, phone records, and even social media posts, The protagonist walked into Jeff's workplace, a sleek real estate office in Charleston. Dressed in a sharp suit and with a determined expression, he approached the receptionist and asked to speak with Jeff. When Jeff appeared, his usual confident demeanor faltered as soon as he saw the protagonist. "Can I help you?" Jeff asked, his voice steady but his eyes wary. "You already have," the protagonist replied coldly, placing the folder on the desk between them. "I think it's time we talk about what you did at the wedding." Jeff glanced at the folder but didn't open it. "Look, I don't know what you think happened." "Don't bother denying it," the protagonist interrupted. "I have the texts. I know about the late-night calls. I even know about the hotel. You went after a married woman, and you thought you'd get away with it." Jeff's face turned pale, and he shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "I didn't force her to do anything," he muttered defensively. "She's the one who—" "You both made choices," the protagonist cut in, his voice sharp. "But let me make one thing clear. If I hear even a whisper about you trying something like this again, I won't hesitate to let everyone know the kind of man you are. That includes your clients, your boss, and anyone else who matters to you." Jeff swallowed hard, his bravado crumbling under the weight of the threat. "Fine," he said quietly. "I get it." My work felt mouth dry, and I knew it was better than the fear of the unknown. Satisfied, the protagonist turned to leave, pausing only to deliver one final warning. "Next time, think twice before destroying someone else's life. Not everyone will be as restrained as I am." As he walked out of the office, the protagonist felt a sense of closure. Confronting Jeff wouldn't undo the damage, but it was a step toward reclaiming his power and moving forward. The day the divorce was finalized, the protagonist felt a bittersweet mix of relief and closure. The court proceedings had gone in his favor, thanks to the overwhelming evidence of Lisa's infidelity and financial misconduct. The judge awarded him a larger share of their marital assets, including their home, and ordered Lisa to repay half of the funds she had spent during her affair. Her betrayal, laid bare in legal terms, had left little room for sympathy in the court's eyes. Lisa's reaction to the ruling was subdued. The once confident woman who had walked out the door for Sarah's wedding weekend now seemed deflated, burdened by the consequences of her actions. She packed her belongings quietly over the next few days, avoiding prolonged interactions with the protagonist. On the morning she moved out, they shared a brief, awkward goodbye. "I'm sorry," Lisa said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I never meant to hurt you." The protagonist nodded but said nothing. There was nothing left to say. Her words, however sincere, couldn't undo the damage she had caused. As Lisa drove away, the protagonist stood in the doorway of what was now solely his home. The weight of the past few months began to lift. He felt no triumph in Lisa's defeat, only the satisfaction of knowing he had stood up for himself and regained control of his life. With the conflict behind him, the protagonist turned his focus to the future. The chapter with Lisa was closed, and while the pain of her betrayal lingered, it no longer defined him. It was time to rebuild, not just his home, but his sense of self. And he was ready. With Lisa gone and the house now his alone, the protagonist found solace in transforming the space into something that truly felt like his own. The sterile, magazine-perfect aesthetic that Lisa had favored was replaced with a warm, personal touch. He started with the living room, swapping out the stiff, modern furniture for cozy, inviting pieces that reflected his personality. Walls once adorned with abstract art were replaced by framed photos of his favorite landscapes and trails, reminders of the hobbies he was rediscovering. The process of redecorating became more than just a task. It was a symbol of reclaiming his life. He painted the walls in calming earth tones, added bookshelves filled with novels he'd meant to read for years, and hung soft, warm lighting that made the space feel like a sanctuary. Even small touches, like a new set of dishes or fresh plants on the windowsills, brought a sense of renewal. At the same time, he reached out to the friends who had supported him through the ordeal. Dinners, weekend hikes, and casual meetups became a regular part of his routine, rekindling bonds that had been neglected during his marriage. He joined a local cycling club, rediscovering the joy of long rides through scenic trails. With each passing day, the house and his life felt less like a reminder of what he had lost and more like a celebration of what he was rebuilding. It wasn't just about moving on, it was about thriving, and for the first time in months, he felt free. A year after the divorce, the protagonist finally felt ready to dip his toes back into the world of dating. The thought of trusting someone again was daunting, but he knew he couldn't let his past define his future. He started cautiously, setting up a profile on a dating app and keeping his expectations modest. After a few casual dates that lacked a spark, he met Emily. From the moment they began talking, there was something different about her. She was kind, down to earth, and refreshingly genuine, a stark contrast to the guarded and manipulative behavior he had endured in his previous marriage. Their conversations flowed effortlessly, and her warmth put him at ease in a way he hadn't realized he needed. Their first date was simple: coffee at a small quiet cafe. Emily's laughter was infectious, her stories vivid and engaging. She didn't shy away from asking about his past, but she listened without judgment, offering empathy rather than pity. As they began seeing each other regularly, the protagonist found himself rediscovering parts of himself he thought he'd lost. Emily's honesty and openness were a balm for his wounded heart, helping him realize that not everyone would betray his trust. With Emily, he felt a sense of hope and healing. For the first time since his life had been upended, he saw the possibility of building something new, something healthy and strong. Moving forward wasn't just a goal anymore. It was his reality. The story explores the devastating impact of betrayal and the resilience required to rebuild after trust is shattered. It delves into the protagonist's journey of self-discovery, showing how personal growth can emerge from even the deepest pain. The power of closure is a central theme, highlighting that moving forward is not about revenge, but reclaiming control over one's life. It also underscores the importance of valuing oneself, setting boundaries, and learning to trust again after profound heartbreak. The protagonist's emotional journey begins with a sense of trust and stability in his marriage, rooted in routine and mutual understanding. This gives way to suspicion as Lisa's behavior changes, leading to heartbreak when her betrayal is uncovered. Determined to seek justice and protect himself, the protagonist channels his pain into action. As time passes, he transitions into acceptance, healing, and eventually optimism, finding peace and hope in the process of rebuilding his life. The confrontation between the protagonist and Lisa is charged with raw emotion. He begins with a firm and unwavering demand for the truth, placing the evidence before her. Protagonist: Lisa, explain these messages. You can't lie your way out of this anymore. Lisa told the psychiatrist what had happened. I told you, it didn't mean anything. I was drunk, and I wasn't thinking clearly. Stop making excuses. Drunk or not, you knew what you were doing. We've been married for 8 years and you threw it all away for a fling at a wedding. Lisa breaks down, sobbing uncontrollably, clutching her head in her hands. Away. Please. I made a mistake. I love you. It was stupid, but it didn't mean anything. Protagonist: it meant enough for you to lie to me, to sneak around, to betray everything we built. This isn't just about the mistake, Lisa. It's about the choices you made after. It's about who you became. You're completely right, her husband began. But I know what you went through, and it wasn't the ship of Sarah. Months later, after the divorce and his journey of rebuilding, the protagonist reflects on his growth. In a quiet moment with Emily, he shares his hard-earned peace. For the first time in years, I feel like I can trust again, not just you, but myself. I didn't think I'd ever get here. Emily, that's because you're stronger than you know. You deserve to be happy again. The dialogue encapsulates his transition from heartbreak to healing, emphasizing the hope and trust that come with letting go of the past and embracing a new future. As the dust settled on the tumultuous chapter of his life, the protagonist found himself reflecting on the lessons learned. Betrayal had shattered his sense of security, but it also forced him to confront truths he had long ignored about his marriage, about himself, and about what he truly wanted in life. Resilience wasn't a choice, it was a necessity. Picking up the pieces and rebuilding wasn't easy, but it was empowering. Redecorating the house, reconnecting with friends, and rediscovering his passions gave him a sense of control he hadn't felt in years. He realized that moving on wasn't about erasing the pain, but learning to coexist with it and letting it shape a stronger, wiser version of himself. "This is my life," he thought one evening as he sat on his newly decorated patio. The echoes of the past no longer haunted him. Instead, they reminded him of how far he had come. Sitting beside Emily, watching the sunset, he felt a peace he hadn't known in years. Emily's presence was a quiet reassurance, a reminder that not all relationships end in betrayal. With her, he had rediscovered the courage to trust, to open his heart, and to embrace the vulnerability that comes with new beginnings. "Thank you for being here," he said softly, turning to Emily. She smiled, squeezing his hand. "You don't have to thank me. You're the one who decided to move forward." In that moment, the protagonist felt hopeful, not just for their relationship, but for the life he was rebuilding. The pain of his past had taught him to value himself and to cherish the present. The future was no longer clouded by fear or resentment. It was a blank canvas, full of possibility. As the last rays of sunlight dipped below the horizon, he whispered to himself, "I've made it through the worst, and now it's time to live again." With Emily by his side, he was ready for whatever came next.